But we will kick off as we do every episode with our segment called AI Ahas, the things that we are using AI for in our personal or professional lives that we find particularly delightful or interesting that we're learning from. So, will you do the honors and kick us off this episode, Bridget? What have you been using AI for?
Will, and I have to say, like, this gets, like, more and more complicated, I feel like, every time we do this because I have I have too many things to choose from. I'm not sure they're all interesting, but I do find, like I bet you do, that it's now just crept into so many parts of my life, and I was saying to you recently that I feel like lots of other people in my life are coming along. I've had, like, friends and family members ask for, tutorials recently, and once I give them the tutorials, they get, they have the experience of actually using it instead of hearing me talk about using it, and I think it's different. When on GPT-5 release date, I got a text early in the morning from my brother I had a couple of months ago, given a tutorial, and he was like, "GPT-5's out today," and I was like, "Yep, it is out today." So that's been kind of fun. But the one I want to talk about today is I've been using it to help me think about how to talk about, both in writing, because I'm like drafting something that I may or may not publish. I don't know. We'll see. And in presentations, the level of human error we tolerate in courts. And what prompted this, you won't be surprised, is those stories about the two different judges, and I think they were both in federal courts, doesn't really matter, that released opinions recently, like in the last few weeks, that had hallucinations in them. And they were clearly hallucinations. In both cases, the opinions were withdrawn, which is, of course, the right thing to do. And there's been so much backlash and pearl clutching and, lots of fretting, like, across legal communities about, like, oh gosh, now we have judges using AI improperly. And that's all fine. But it has, like, steam coming out of my ears, because of the as opposed to what question, right? I don't, to quote Andy Perlman, like, if we were considering those examples against a justice system where there was no error, then I want to pile on. I want to pile on about, like, how we need to make sure courts have resources and training and, can use AI correctly. And I actually think all those things are true. I want them to have resources and tools, and technology, frankly, to help them do their job better. But as somebody who practiced in courts for a long time and worked in courts for a long time, the human error that we tolerate is so significant. But it's not good enough to just say that. I wanted to figure out how to say it with some, robustness for different audiences. So first I said, like, help me with the numbers. Like, how could we measure it? And GPT-5, like, went way too deep for me. I actually had to pull it back. I was like, okay, that's too many numbers. Like, it was literally like coding different graphs and, like, you can use this graph in a slide and it shows the intersection. I was like, no, 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 no. Just do your best to, like, pick one jurisdiction, get the reversal rate. Like, let's start with the reversal rate in appellate reversals of trial court decisions in federal court. I picked, the federal court that Michigan cases are appealed to, the Sixth Circuit, and then do the same in the Michigan appellate courts. And so, and then let's think about whether that number is, like, a fair place to start. And so that number, by the way, is in the Sixth Circuit, last year. The reversal rate was about 5.6% if you average the criminal and civil cases. The civil ones were actually 10%. The Michigan Court of Appeals, 21% of cases were reversed and 11% gave partial relief. Like, that's a stunning number of cases where we are saying GPT-5 went and did all the data crunching for me. So I just have the numbers, which is really convenient. And what I haven't done yet, but I still have it, like, thinking about how to do it, is I wanted to now look at the number of opinions where the court did not reverse, but it didn't do so because it was tolerating harmless error. Because in an awful lot of cases, we affirm a trial court decision, even though there's error, but we explicitly tolerate harmless error. And I want to sort of add those numbers to the mix next, and it's still working on that. I then asked it to think about how we would layer on exonerations. Exonerations are cases where, after a case has been fully affirmed, throughout a court process. Later, we learned that there was a mistake, an error that meant that the wrong person had been convicted, or somebody who hadn't committed a crime had been convicted. So that's yet another category of cases where even that appellate court reversal rate is undercounting, right? Then I asked it to think about how to layer on the number of cases that never get appealed, because as you know, and we talk about all the time, most people in civil cases can't afford lawyers, so they might find a way to navigate their trial court case. Probably not that well, because we speak this other weird language in courts. They almost never can figure out how to appeal those cases if they don't like the result. So it's a really small number of only lawyered cases that even make it there. So this floor, this rate of error that we tolerate, is a very squishy, soft floor. And I had it like just create a bunch of different things, some slides, some talking points, some ways to talk about it in writing, talk about it to different audiences. And it was it really helped me like think about how to talk about this in the future. I have not inserted myself yet into this conversation, but as you can tell, I'm a little worked up about it and a little bit ready to. And I now have lots of data and ways to think about talking about it at my disposal. And that was way too long for an aha, and I apologize. How about you? What was your aha?
Gosh, I really do not enjoy following your your Bridget. That's incredible. It's also making me think of a presentation you and I did earlier this year with Darth Vaughn, where he was interested in gathering data on the number of times when lawyers cite, this is a different point, but the number of times lawyers cite pieces for the inappropriate position or the incorrect position in an attempt to deceive courts. And, you know, not that we tolerate that, but how many times that goes undetected. So there's all sorts of false statements in briefing before courts. And then, as you mentioned, just outright error in decisions made by courts, whether it ultimately affects the outcome of the case or it's overturned. That's super interesting. I'm laughing at your initial output from GPT-5 though, because some of the reviews compared it to like overworked assistant, or is that what it's over energetic assistant energy,
Yes,
which was
totally.
definitely what I was getting from it. Like, chill out.
I know. It's like, dude, take it down a notch. Yeah, we're talking to people who don't view statistics. Let's just like talk in basic numbers.
I struggled with my AI aha this week because mine was a little bit in the reverse direction. It was a little bit back to basics. I think it's a result of being challenged by a project that I'm working on in a way that's uncomfortable to me. So I have been trying to use different AI tools that I love to make the project easier for my brain because the activity's inefficient for my brain because it's challenging. And by trying to use all of those tools, in the end, I was just like finding new ways to spin my wheels and not making the project like high quality. And eventually I realized that I've just found all new tech infused ways to procrastinate. And what I ended up doing was I just sort of had to like slap myself on the wrist and shut down my laptop and take out a piece of paper and sit down and start writing with a pen from scratch using like my naked human brain to write longhand. And it made me think of, and again, I feel like we should have like a Pee Wee's Playhouse like sound every time we say Ethan Mollick's name. He's like the word of the day,
We
but
should, yeah.
he had he had like a great one useful thing blog post about, and I think like the big takeaway was write first, think first, meet first, about all these tools are going to come out that make it really easy for us to shortcut a lot of the things that are painful for our brains to do because they're inefficient. But the inefficiency and the investment of energy is the actual point in getting a quality product.
Yep.
And so that's what I learned about working on this project is I wasted a lot of time and energy trying to use AI to shortcut it when really I do ultimately want to use AI on this project, but it now is not the time to do that. The time to
Yeah.
do it is later when I've drafted it and I wanna refine it and make it better, and I can already see how I'm going to do that, which is to get feedback on the writing, to find places where I can refer to different parts of the writing in other areas, because that's something I'm not really familiar with or skilled at, like, when you read a book and they say, like, "Remember back in chapter 3, we talked about this," like, I feel like that takes either an editorial team or a skill set I don't have that I feel like the AI could help me with and other things, but this was not the way to do it. But I'm glad that I learned, and I hope that that will help me also teach other people as they're trying to learn how to use it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like I've had that experience a number of times where I jumped in too quickly and then I realized this is not helping. I need to step back and at least figure out what I think I'm building or creating in terms of a writing project or a memo or a strategic plan of sorts. You have to at least have done the initial thinking. I don't know what I read recently. Did you read this? I'm sure we're all reading all the same things, but that the thing about AI is it's kind of middle to middle, not end to end. And like you really are still valuable at the front and the back, right? The back we know, like check your sites before you file the brief or check your sites before you deliver the opinion. But the front is also right, like just in framing and organizing and thinking about what it is that you're then going to get the middle to middle help with. And I think that's still true.
Yeah.
Maybe it won't be true like 5 years from now. I have no idea, but it definitely feels true now.
And I think, and again, I think Ethan's written about this and others have written about this too. I don't want to suggest he's the only person writing about this, but the research on learning and I mean, it's also logical if you think about it. You're not making a deep impression in your mind
Yeah.
if you're offloading things to AI. And there are lots of places where we can use AI for lots of different things. And that's what you and I talk about all the time. But if you're working on a project where your goal really is to learn about the content and develop new ideas and new connections, you want your brain to be deeply invested in that learning process. And I felt like I had been thoughtful in developing the outline and thinking it
Yeah.
through. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready to dive in with my buddy Claude and we're going to like workshop this together. And I don't know. It just was not working. I was like, I'm just going to have to come back to you, Claude. I just need to go back to my whiteboard and my mind mapping and my drafting the old fashioned way. So it's almost like my AI aha was my human brain sometimes is just needs to be by itself for a little while.
Yeah. We're not ready to replace it yet. That's because your brain is like super big and smart. So I get it. Yeah.
Well,
I love
thank
your
you,
brain.
Bridget. Oh, I love your brain. Thank you.